Fuelled by Elon Musk's social media tirades against Sir Keir Starmer and his Labour government, Westminster's return from the festive recess has been dominated by claims and counterclaims about the grooming gang scandal. It made for a heated and tense Prime Minister's questions, where the Conservative leader continually repeated her demand for a new national inquiry.
It is very possible to have actions, take on more, and still have a national inquiry. So why won't he listen to victims and launch a national inquiry which would have the power to summon witnesses and make them give evidence under oath?
She was the Children's Minister. She was the Women's and Equalities Minister. I can't remember her, I can't recall her once raising this issue in the House, once calling for a national inquiry. It's only in recent days she's jumped on the bandwagon.
I have raised this issue. I've raised it in speeches. I've raised it publicly. He knows that as a minister, I would not have been speaking on this specific issue. I was not a Home Office minister. The Prime Minister called for 9 inquiries in the last Parliament. Does he not see that by resisting this one, people will start to worry about a cover-up?
This is an important issue, and we have to focus on the victims and survivors, and it isn't helpful. This sort of lies and misinformation and slinging of mud doesn't help them one bit.
Mr. Speaker, this is one of the worst scandals in recent British history. But how are they going to explain to their constituents that obeying his whip is more important than doing the right thing?
Not once in 8 years did she stand here and say what she's just said. Not once in 8 years. They didn't act on the recommendations. They want a national inquiry. We had a national inquiry, the J inquiry, the J report. 20 recommendations, not a single one implemented. Not a single one implemented.
Paris Badenoch and her Tory MPs later lost a Commons vote on their call for a national inquiry. We reflected on the divisions at Westminster with STV's correspondent Paris Gourtsoyannis. Paris, what did you make of today's Prime Minister's questions time?
Well, Rona, it's been an extraordinary start to the political year, and it's perhaps unsurprising that this was a pretty bad-tempered PMQs, given the attacks online that are behind all this, although it didn't quite stoop as low in terms of the tone as some of the stuff we've seen on social media in the past few days. You had Keir Starmer fiercely defending his previous role as chief prosecutor for England and Wales in terms of how he tackled child sexual abuse, and pointing out that the Conservative government in 14 years in power didn't act on the recommendations that we've already had from previous inquiries on this issue. And then the leader of the opposition, Paris Badenoch, demanding a new inquiry specifically into grooming gangs and using languages like cover-up and complicity, and seeming to try and put pressure on individual Labour MPs by listing some of the English towns where these grooming gangs have been active. That really angered the Labour benches. But the Conservative Party was forced to admit that Paris Badenoch, in fact, in 8 years as an MP, hasn't previously raised this issue and hasn't actually met a victim of a grooming gang, which opens her up to the charge of political opportunism.
Well, yeah, and how much of this debate do you think is fuelled by Elon Musk's social media posts?
I don't think this issue would be top of the agenda at all if you didn't have the world's richest man and the owner of one of its biggest social media platforms in the past few days posting literally hundreds of times highly personal attacks against Keir Starmer, his ministers, his government, often in extreme terms, relying on misinformation and conspiracy. MPs from all parties are quite concerned about what this means, not just in electoral terms, because of course Elon Musk, he backed Donald Trump, helped get him elected, and now he seems to be turning his attention to European politics, including the UK, backing the right and the far right. It's bigger than that, because what does it mean for political debate when debate online, with all its unfiltered extremes, is informing what happens in Parliament rather than the other way around? That's seen as a real challenge to democracy.
And do you think Westminster will move on from this, in the next couple of days?
Well, it won't happen today, but the government could still concede the specific inquiry on grooming gangs. Clearly, attention at Westminster is going to move on to other things like the NHS, which is what the government wanted to be talking about this week. But, this issue is such a rallying point, a recruiting tool for the right, particularly Nigel Farage's Reform Party, and it lives online. And Nigel Farage is going to keep bringing this back in elections for years to come, which means the Conservatives are going to have to sound tough on it, and Labour is going to have to respond.
As well as being the world's richest man, Elon Musk is also a close advisor to Donald Trump. He takes office just over 2 weeks' time. What do you think relations are going to be like between the US and the UK in the light of everything that's been said? It could be quite tricky.
Well, indeed, we've already heard from Donald Trump, even though he's not president yet, making demands of America's traditional allies. And on the list of governments that are going to be worried about the incoming administration, probably, Greenland, Panama and Canada are at the top of that list. But the UK government is concerned too. They're concerned about the impact potentially of tariffs on trade, and the impact on UK business, the impact of the US withdrawing its military support from Ukraine. And Elon Musk clearly has this deep personal antipathy, dislike of Keir Starmer and the Labour government. That may well be because of all the attention that this issue is getting him, because it is such a rallying point for the right online. So, Elon Musk has already had the president's ear at Mar-a-Lago. He's going to have it in the White House. We've seen what he's been willing to post online. We can only imagine what he's saying in private.
And how do you think Keir Starmer will get on with Trump then?
Well, he's clearly going to try to build a relationship. There's talk of an early visit by the Prime Minister to the White House. They've already met. And of course, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, didn't meet Kamala Harris, the Democratic candidate for president. So this has been a big focus of his. But having Elon Musk in the presidency here is not going to help build that relationship.
OK, it feels like the calm before the storm, doesn't it? Paris, thank you very much indeed.